In Module 8, we're going to start to think about generating and creating some digital content or learning objects. So far in the class, we've established a platform for distributing our digital content or communicating using a blog. And then we talked about connectivism as a theory for learning, and we created a network using RSS feeds and RSS feed readers. And then we created and shared some basic digital content, such as blog posts that had some images, and then we incorporated a more academic sort of article review assignment into the blog. So in this module, we're going to develop some online content or learning objects that are more directed, interactive, and potentially more engaging. So we'll start a multi-week project. We'll produce a couple things over those weeks. We'll produce some digital learning objects that are designed to address a performance gap in our organizations, and we'll develop digital content with those training needs at the center of that content. And then you'll post and share that content through your blog. We all work for organizations that are results oriented, and these organizations exist to generate some sort of results. So if we work for the government, or we work for schools, or we work for corporations, we all need to generate some sort of output. And organizations are made up of people, and individual results ultimately drive organizations. So it is our ongoing challenge to find ways to help people perform in these environments. And these are the things, or these are the individuals that you're going to be developing your learning objects for over the next several weeks in this course. So for the assignment this week, what I'd like you to do is to download the Training Needs Assessment Planning Sheet that I've provided. You can see a screenshot of it here on this slide. Make sure you read the note at the top that says Important Note. I'll cover that as I talk here. But there are 4 steps that I'd like you to consider in the planning phase. The first step is to determine a training need, somewhere where there's a performance gap. The gap between what individuals can do right now and what the ideal performance would be. So I want you to write something surrounding that gap, the identification of that gap, and how you would like them to perform ultimately. Then in step 2, I want you to determine and think about if an on-demand training object like we're going to create in Captivate would fit that particular gap or that performance improvement that you're trying to deliver on in the training. And in step 2, if the Captivate learning object doesn't seem to fit, you probably need to rethink which performance gap you're going to work on as part of this class activity. So you kind of have to go between the two to determine a good fit between what you want to train people on and some of the limitations that Captivate have, or maybe the limitations that you have for using Captivate at this time. Then in step 3, you're going to write learning objectives, and in step 4, what I want you to do is describe what those learning objects are going to look like in Captivate. So if those are going to be a quiz, or those are going to be some sort of basic presentation with narration, I want you to describe that. This is just the planning phase. So we're going to plan this week, and then we'll move into some basic development and experimentation with Captivate next week, and move on from there. So I have provided additional detail on each one of these steps in the subsequent slides. You can click on each slide to the left as you're working through the planning document to review, or you can press the next button on this slide to advance forward. So in step 1, you want to determine the training need. You want to find the performance gap, or find a performance gap. It's the desired versus the actual performance of maybe one of your employees, maybe a classmate, a colleague. And for this assignment, you can identify training gaps pretty much anywhere. What I want you to do is find something that's relevant to you. You can see the questions that I've put in the planning worksheet. So step 1, describe the performance gap that you've identified. What type of I can't do this problem will the training address? Is it knowledge? Is it a skill? Is it a technology? Is it rules or standards? And then I want you to describe that difference. I want you to describe the gap. Then in step 2, once you've identified a training need, I want you to move on to determine if training is appropriate for addressing that need. So in general, sort of high level, you want to make sure that the training is the most appropriate intervention. So training might be appropriate when there's poor performance resulting from a knowledge or skill deficiency, lack of basic skills, say in technology. There may be new legislation that have come out or new rules that require some additional knowledge. You might have higher performance standards that need to be met. And then training might not be appropriate when individuals don't have sufficient tools, they don't have the equipment or resources they need, or the physical setting isn't appropriate and is causing problems, or there might be just a lack of motivation. It's a sort of a job and person fit. In these cases, training may not be the most appropriate approach. Specific to this class, we need to determine, is the training need a good fit for an online just-in-time learning object such as we're going to create using Captivate? So can the training be delivered just in time, where it is needed, when it is needed? In other words, can you imagine a scenario where someone brings this learning object up on their computer and learns when they need to learn this just in time? Or they bring it up on their iPad and they before they go into a meeting, a sales meeting or something along those lines, and review a strategy for delivering the content of that sale. So some examples may be that I can think of from my work. Every time I have to put a YouTube video into a PowerPoint presentation, which is somewhat complicated, I have to watch a software simulation. That's just a nice just-in-time module or learning object that I can tap into. Or if I have to troubleshoot my wireless router at home, I can go and find online content that can help me there. This is often training content where it's not very efficient for you to take a class to receive this information because you'll forget it. You will forget the information before you need it. And some may never need the training. In the example above, the wireless router, if the technician comes to your house, sets up the wireless router, and it works flawlessly forever, you really don't need this particular training, so why put the individuals through that particular course? So you can see the question down below. I want you to determine if an online training object would be appropriate for the particular training that you are writing around in step 1. And if it is not appropriate for such a module, then you need to be thinking about a different training need or gap to address. In step 3, I want you to think about the behavioral learning objectives that go along with the training that you are thinking about designing. So behavioral learning objectives should be measurable. They should have and relate to the conditions under which the performance would occur, and there should be some criterion for acceptable or good performance. So I've written a question within your planning sheet that you can tackle the behavioral learning objectives. If you're unfamiliar with objectives and not so comfortable with writing objectives, I've provided a link here, and if you type in the tiny URL at the bottom or underneath the link, you can also get to this website, which will provide you some additional information about writing learning objectives. And then in step 4 on your planning sheet, I want you to describe what learning objects you'll create in Captivate 8 to address the identified learning gap that you wrote about in step 1. Now you can develop many different types of learning objects in Captivate. You can do basic tutorials, basic lectures. You can do interactive quizzes. You can do software simulations. There's a lot you can do in Captivate. I've provided some examples in Canvas that you can look at to get you thinking. You know, if you're just new to Captivate, you can think about a basic tutorial and then a quiz. You could think about doing a software simulation to demonstrate how to do something, for example, in Excel or within an application that you use at work. Or you can do something like a conversational scenario. And I know that a number of you have taken the previous course to this, which is EDOD 692A, and you worked on planning for a conversational scenario. And there's no reason why you can't bring that planning or that conversational scenario that you described in that class and produce it in this class. What we're trying to do here is get you introduced to Captivate as a powerful tool for developing online content. So this is an introduction. And then get you comfortable that you can do these things and that you could then potentially move on to develop some of the advanced online activities that Captivate has. For example, Captivate can do motion detection within your device. So if you have an iPad or a tablet, you could actually have students rotate the tablet based on an activity and teach them something using that. Get very creative there. You can also design location-aware applications for training using GPS. And so that certain training modules would actually be triggered when an individual enters a particular space and they potentially would need that particular training module. There's a lot you can do with Captivate 8. So what I'm trying to do here with you is get you introduced to this, get you to produce some basic stuff, realize that it's a fairly intuitive software package, and then in the future, maybe pick up and develop some more advanced interactive training modules using this particular tool. And also remember that what we're talking about here is getting more people like yourselves to produce interesting and engaging training content, small training nuggets, I guess you will, of content that can be delivered through things like blogs or other mechanisms and other mechanisms where you can create learning networks.